Hi, it's Katrina. There are many places in the world that are beautiful but deadly. While these places are incredible, I'm not sure they're worth the risk. People have lost their lives visiting thermal springs and climbing mountains, thinking they were just going on a fun adventure. Here are 8 of the most dangerous places in the world. Let me know if you've ever visited any of them, since you obviously survived to tell the tale. The Champagne Pool. Champagne Pool is a remarkable feature in New Zealand. It's a very popular tourist spot that occasionally boils people alive. Champagne Pool is notorious for its bright and happy colors. It looks like a pool of pure champagne, but don't get too thirsty. The pool gets its effervescence from minerals and chemicals that can kill. The pool isn't just hot, it's full of poison. There are bits of gold and silver, though good luck extracting them. The pool also contains mercury and arsenic. With all these minerals swirling around together, you get a cornucopia of oranges, yellows, and toxic greens. The temperature in Champagne Pool is always hot. It's about 165 degrees Fahrenheit at any given time. The heat comes from geothermal activity. There are geothermal vents and geysers underneath North Island, where the pool is. They keep the chemical bath nice and toasty. One of the greatest tragedies came in 2010. A young boy was on a family outing the day after Christmas when he slipped and fell into the pool. The youngster experienced what can only be described as the worst pain imaginable. Witnesses told the New Zealand Herald they saw the child scream in agony as his skin slid off. He was quickly taken out of the boiling pool and airlifted to the hospital. However, he died soon after from severe burns. Surgeon Richard Wong-Shi from the hospital said the boy was burned 100%. He was only kept alive until his family could gather to say their goodbyes. Mount Kilauea. Mount Kilauea is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the United States of America. It's also one of the most popular, attracting millions of visitors a year. How is it possible such a popular tourist destination is also so deadly? In 1868, 46 people died along the coast of Kilauea. A 7.9 magnitude earthquake shook the mountain and created a tsunami. 46 people drowned and entire villages were washed into the sea. There was also a landslide resulting in 31 fatalities. It was devastating, but not as catastrophic as what happened a century before. The single greatest catastrophe was when Mount Kilauea erupted unexpectedly in November 1790. It was the deadliest volcanic eruption in the history of the United States. Nobody knows exactly how many people were killed, but it was definitely more than 400. Estimates range anywhere from 400 to 5,000, though records from that time are notoriously inaccurate. This volcano has been killing people for centuries. One of its most recent victims was an elderly gentleman in 2022. He was visiting Mount Kilauea when family members reported him missing. Park rangers searched through the night, finally finding his body 100 feet under the rim of the viewing area at the top of Kilauea. The rangers think he fell to his death trying to get a better glimpse at the bubbling lava lake inside the volcano's caldera. Something similar happened to an army soldier in 2019. The soldier narrowly survived his 300-foot fall after trying to get a better view of the lava. The Darian Gap. The Darian Gap has been hailed as the most dangerous jungle in the world. It's a lawless stretch of dense wilderness on the border of Colombia and Panama. It's filled with deadly snakes and disease-spreading insects. It's also home to anti-government guerrilla rebels. If the elements don't kill you, the guerrilla soldiers just might. The no man's land has been dominated by narcotics traffickers since the early 1960s. The route across the Darian Gap is about 50 miles, used primarily for moving weapons and cocaine. It's also heavily traveled by desperate migrants from places like Cuba, Syria, and Somalia as they try reaching the United States. Thousands of people from around the world try to get to basically any country in South America and then try to walk up from there to the United States, braving the people and the jungle. Many migrants enter the gap every year but don't always make it out to the other side. Jan Philip Brownisk was the Swedish traveler who thought he could brave the dangers of the Darian Gap alone. His story is so tragic it's become a campfire tale whispered at night by backpackers crawling across South America. Jan's terrible journey started in May of 2013. He sent an email to his wife in Sweden from an internet cafe in Colombia. He said he was ready to trek across the Darian Gap and would reach out again on the other side. He never made it. The trail isn't impossible and not everybody dies. I know a few people that have actually done it several times. Although the first time it took 3 days, and the second time they did get lost in the jungle for a month after the coyote took their money and abandoned them. They didn't think they were going to make it, but an indigenous member of a tribe found the group and led them out of the jungle. There was a UK tour company that briefly ran organized hikes across the gap. It's become a badge of honor for adventurers to cross the gap alive. It's one of the most dangerous things that tourists can do, as is evidenced by what happened to Jan. He entered that dangerous jungle and nobody found him for 2 years. Nobody knows exactly what happened to Jan, nor even how his body was found. The International Committee of the Red Cross came into possession of a small casket containing the skeletal remains of Jan Philip. His identity was confirmed by a DNA test. It's very likely he was kidnapped by narco-traffickers and shot dead. What horrors Jan experienced in his final moments will never be known. Masai Mara. Masai Mara is by far one of the most dangerous game reserves in all of Africa. It's been described as the most perilous place to go on safari. Tourists have died here in just about every way you can imagine. They've been murdered, trampled, and eaten. Masai Mara is an incredibly beautiful piece of wild Africa. It's within Kenya, named after the indigenous Masai people who have been living in the Serengeti for centuries. Although it is dangerous, it's also a very important place. It's a conservation area with thriving populations of lions, cheetahs, leopards, and bush elephants. Without the park, these animals would have nowhere safe to live. The most famous yet horribly tragic deaths within the nature reserve was that of Julie Ward. In 1988, the 28-year-old British woman went on a safari in the game reserve and never left. She was a publishing assistant and wildlife photographer who had already been in Africa for 7 months when she traveled to Masai Mara with a friend from Australia. After nearly a year of exploring Africa, she had about a week before her return to England. This was her last stop before the epic journey was supposed to come to an end. On September 5th, Julie and her friend, Dr. Glenn Burns' vehicle broke down. Dr. Burns returned to the capital of Nairobi while Julie camped by herself at the Mara Serena Lodge. The vehicle was repaired the next day and she went by herself to pick up some supplies that were left at the Sand River camp. It was the last time she was seen alive. Julie's father went to Kenya immediately to look for his daughter. He hired a private plane to search the game reserve for Julie's missing vehicle. On September 13th, Julie's father spotted the vehicle in a gully. The plane landed and Julie's father went to investigate. There, he saw something that no father should ever have to see. Near the wreckage of the vehicle was his daughter's burned and dismembered body. Kenyan authorities put forth the most ridiculous theory you've ever heard. They claimed that Julie Ward was eaten by lions and then struck by lightning. They really said she was ripped apart by wild cats. Then her dead body was struck by lightning and partially incinerated. It was later accepted that Julie was killed by a machete and doused in gasoline. The Kenyan coroners had purposely altered their report. Julie's father went on a rampage trying to bring justice to his daughter. He made over 100 trips to Kenya. He's accused the government and the former president of covering up the crime to protect the tourist industry. The killer has never been found. In 2009, the former Kenyan president's son, Jonathan Moi, was accused of the crime. The Scariest Mountain. If you had to guess which mountain in the world is the deadliest, what would you say? Would it be Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world? Or would you guess Annapurna, the 10th tallest mountain in the world? Yes, climbing Mount Everest is extremely dangerous. Since the 1920s, 310 have perished trying to reach the ultimate peak. It's technically the highest absolute death count for any mountain in the world, but it's not the deadliest. The thing about Everest is that it attracts more climbers than any other great peak. Because of the sheer number of people who climb Everest, it's going to have more fatalities than other mountains. Data collected from the Himalayan database in 2021 marked Mount Everest as having 2,191 official expeditions. The death toll per expedition is 14.1%. That means that 14.1% of expeditions will experience at least one death. Now let's take a look at Annapurna. Since 1900, there have been roughly 72 deaths on the mountain. It's a much smaller number than Everest, but there is one major difference. The same data from 2021 says only 244 expeditions tried to reach the summit compared to Everest's nearly 2,200. That places the death toll per expedition at 29.5%. Over a quarter of all expeditions to the mountain have proven fatal. The Shackleton Trail. The most dangerous hiking trail in the world is located in Antarctica. It's such a brutal trek that those who attempt to complete it often end up dead. The most recent fatality on the epic trail was explorer Henry Worsley. He was an ex-army officer from London who had to be rescued 30 miles from reaching the end of the trail in 2016. Although he was rescued, he wasn't saved. Henry died shortly after he was picked up from complete organ failure. The journey destroyed his body beyond repair. So which trail was Henry Worsley trying to do? He was following the footsteps of his hero, Sir Ernest Shackleton. Shackleton was the man who tried to walk across Antarctica at the beginning of the 20th century. He was part of the Endurance expedition. Ernest Shackleton and the others in his group walked to within 97 miles of the South Pole. They had intended on walking 1,720 miles in an astonishing 91 days. That would have been 19 miles a day across unknown and brutal terrain. Disappointingly for Shackleton and the crew, they had bitten off more than they could chew. The ponies started to die and they began to grow very hungry. On Christmas Day, they were camped at 9,500 feet on the polar plateau. They smoked a cigar and each had a spoonful of crème de menthe. It was so cold that their temperatures weren't even showing up on a thermometer. Ultimately, they had to turn around. They were 97 miles short of reaching the South Pole but had no choice but to return to the ship or face death. Explorer Henry Worsley would succeed where Shackleton had failed. He got a little closer, just 30 miles from the South Pole. But Henry's body couldn't take it anymore. He called for rescue and was taken out of the brutal wilderness after 71 days and 913 miles. Doctors thought he was dehydrated and malnourished, but that was not the case. Henry had a bacterial infection that killed him days after his rescue. The Ladder of Doom. In Europe, a newly popular Instagram spot is being called the Stairway to Heaven. Tragically and ironically, the Stairway to Heaven is literally taking people to heaven. In September 2023, a British tourist traveled to Austria to climb mountains and take Instagram photos. What was supposed to be the most epic photo of his life ended in a 300-foot fall. Although his name has not been revealed, local reports say he was 42 years old. A pair of helicopter crews rushed to the scene in hopes they might rescue the tourist, but there was really nothing they could do. He fell off the deadly ladder and there was no way he survived the fall. He was dead when he hit the ground. It's called the Stairway to Heaven on Instagram, but it's more like the Ladder of Doom. The ladder itself is a flimsy rope ladder 120 feet long, stretching between two cliff faces. The ladder is at a dizzying height of 6,739 feet above sea level. Tourism websites are calling it the ultimate adrenaline kick. The panoramic sky ladder is free-floating, meaning it just kind of dangles in midair. You can climb up the ladder to reach the other side of an immense gorge. In most cases, people don't die because they are connected to safety equipment. But in 2020, Instagram gymnast Stephanie Millinger snapped a photo of herself dangling from the ladder with one hand. Others have been trying to mimic this stunt to get crazy photos. Police haven't said what exactly happened to the British tourist who died, though he must not have been connected to the safety equipment. He may have been doing a stunt for a picture and lost his grip. Elk River Falls. In 2015, officials in North Carolina began to track how many people were dying at waterfalls in the state. Since then, numbers have been spiking. There is one waterfall in particular that seems to claim more lives than any other. In the last 25 years, around 50 people have fallen to their deaths at waterfalls throughout North Carolina. Many of those who died were tourists, though some were locals. Out of all the falls, there are two that you need to be very careful of. The first is Whitewater Falls near Cashiers in Transylvania County. Whitewater Falls is over 400 feet high, one of the tallest and most majestic waterfalls in the eastern United States. The issue is that people keep slipping on the rocks at the top of the falls and then plummeting off the edge to their doom. 13 deaths have occurred at Whitewater Falls. The other most dangerous waterfall is Elk River Falls. It's not very tall. In truth, the falls are quite small, but size isn't everything. The issue is that there is a trail that leads directly to the top of the waterfall. It's very easy to walk right onto the falls and to cross over when the water is low. The drop to the bottom is only 50 feet, but the pool below is virtually bottomless. Many people who slip off the falls and hit the water are never found again. Their bodies are pushed down into the unknowable depths of the pool. 2 men died at the falls in 2018, and there was another death just last year in 2022.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Danakil Depression, Ethiopia. The Danakil Depression in northeastern Ethiopia's Afar Triangle, where 3 tectonic plates are moving apart, offers one of the world's most extreme climates, along with some of its most bizarre scenery. According to the BBC, it's one of the hottest, driest, and lowest places on Earth, with an average year-round temperature of 94 degrees Fahrenheit, punctuated by bursts of extreme heat. The depression sits at 410 feet below sea level and receives just 3.9 to 7.9 inches of annual rainfall, which quickly evaporates under the scorching sun. With a reputation for looking like an alien land, the landscape consists of incredibly strange geological phenomena that you're unlikely to witness anywhere else in the world. At least one of the planet's mere handful of lava lakes is located here, and there are also numerous volcanoes, salt pans, hot springs, geysers, sulfur deposits, boiling chemical-filled lakes, and multicolored hydrothermal fields. Yikes! The Danakil Depression will someday be the site of a newly created ocean. At some point, the tectonic plates at the site will diverge far away enough from one another for waters to spill over from the Red Sea and submerge the landscape. This has actually happened before, around 30,000 years ago, and the floodwaters subsequently evaporated, leaving behind the salt deposits that remain at the site today. As inhospitable as the Danakil Depression is, people actually live here, and it's also nicknamed the Cradle of Humanity, as the suspected place where modern humans first evolved. The region's nomadic modern-day residents, most of whom are salt miners, have physically adapted to the extreme heat and arid climate, and they are able to survive on less food and water than the average human. Minqin County, China. When people think of the world's most dangerous places, they tend to examine the topic from the lens of a tourist. But being in a dangerous place is a daily reality for many, who have little choice but to somehow cope with the hazards of their environment. One such place is Minqin County in northwest China, a drought-ridden, ever-diminishing oasis situated between the Tengger and Badain-Jiran deserts. The desert has been encroaching upon Minqin County for decades, invading farmland as groundwater levels continuously decreased. The lack of surface water as sources like lakes and rivers dried up gave locals no other choice than to resort to overexploiting the groundwater to meet their needs. Reforestation efforts were in vain, with nearly 215,000 acres of trees that were planted over the course of a decade withering up and dying. Today, heavy winds and dust plague the once fertile region an estimated 130 days a year. The government declared Minqin County an ecological disaster area and began evacuating the area's 2 million residents, but it's unclear whether any efforts are currently being made to salvage the now barely existent oasis. Lake Karachai, Russia. Arguably the most polluted place on Earth, Lake Karachai was used as a dumping ground for nuclear waste by the Soviet Union starting in 1951. Located in the southern Ural Mountains in eastern Russia, the site was used primarily by a nuclear facility called the Mayak Production Association. The Russian government kept Mayak and its dumping activities a complete secret until 1990, and in 1992, Western scientists finally gained access to Lake Karachai. They discovered that the lake's bottom consisted of an 11-foot layer of radioactive sediment. Even more alarmingly, the highly poisoned water was making its way into nearby freshwater sources, including the Techa River, resulting in the radioactive poisoning of around 65% of local residents years earlier. In another shocking incident showing little to no regard for public health, the lake dried up in 1967, blowing toxic dust into nearby villages and causing residents to fall ill. But because the secret facility and the accompanying city that its operators lived in did not exist on the map, these disasters were kept pretty well under wraps, and nobody really knew what or whom to blame locals' sudden illnesses on. In an attempt to prevent future disasters, the lake was filled in with cement. While certain nearby sites will remain polluted for hundreds of years, the measure seems to have greatly reduced the hazards associated with Lake Karachai, which at one point was capable of administering a lethal dose of radiation to someone within an hour of standing on its shore. But even the experts are unsure of how dangerous Lake Karachai is today due to the lack of experience that even the most learned radiologists have managing such a heavily contaminated site. For this reason, it is consistently monitored and will be for years to come. This is just one example of Russia's vast nuclear pollution problem stemming primarily from unsafe procedures used during the Cold War-era arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States. Mount Washington, New Hampshire. At first glance, 6,288-foot-tall Mount Washington in New Hampshire may seem inconsequential, especially compared to some of the world's most famous peaks, like Mount Everest, which is nearly 5 times taller. But don't let its size fool you. Mount Washington has a reputation for being the world's most dangerous small mountain. On April 12, 1934, the highest ever wind velocity ever recorded at any surface weather station was registered atop Mount Washington at 234 miles per hour. Moreover, around 150 people have died on the mountain since 1849, mostly due to hypothermia. On that note, inclement weather tends to set in quickly and sometimes unpredictably, and the cold is not limited to winters. It's common for hikers to unknowingly be guided off course by high winds, which cause them to become lost, sometimes ending up miles away from their intended course. One terrifying example of the dangers of Mount Washington involves a young man named Gabriel Gautier and his friends, who ascended the mountain at 1:00 p.m. on September 21, 2006, despite warnings from park staff that it was too late in the day to safely do so. As the group climbed, the temperature plummeted and Gautier fell unconscious. His friends continued to the summit and broke into the gift shop, summoning help from there. Rescuers were able to save Gautier's life, but his life was forever changed due to severe brain damage inflicted by his hypothermia. The lesson to be learned here: follow the advice of park staff and hike at your own risk. Snake Island, Brazil. Ilha da Queimada Grande, commonly known as Snake Island, is located off the shore of Brazil, roughly 93 miles from downtown Sao Paulo. It's chock full of venomous pit vipers to the tune of somewhere between 1 and 5 snakes per square meter, hence the island's nickname. They feed on migratory birds, and the food supply is apparently abundant, as evidenced by the thriving snake population. The pit vipers on Snake Island are a unique species called the golden lancehead, which hail from the lancehead genus that is responsible for 90% of snakebite fatalities in Brazil. Golden lancehead snakes grow up to 1.6 feet long, which isn't very long, but their venom packs a powerful punch, causing victims' flesh to rot. The species has evolution to thank for this feature, as having potent venom enables these snakes to quickly and effectively apprehend their avian prey before the bird flies away. Consequently, the Brazilian Navy forbids visitors to the island, minus occasional exceptions that are made for scientists. Biologist Marcelo Duarte, who has visited the island over 20 times, claims that the 1 in 5 snakes per square meter estimate is exaggerated, though not by much, according to Atlas Obscura. Even when considering the low end of this estimate, 1 snake per square meter, that still means a person is never more than 3 feet away from a deadly golden lancehead. Mount Sinabung, Indonesia. Mount Sinabung is an 8,530-foot tall volcano in North Sumatra, Indonesia that erupted in late August 2010 after sitting dormant for over 400 years. Ash spewed miles into the sky as lava overflowed from the cone, marking the first of numerous eruptions that have occurred since the volcano's reawakening. It erupted several more times throughout the following month, and thanks to preparedness and official warnings, nearly everyone in the area safely evacuated. Mount Sinabung erupted again 3 years later in September 2013, followed by 2 more eruptions over the following months, once again forcing locals to flee their homes for safety. The eruptions have continued frequently ever since, and in doing so have killed or critically injured at least a few dozen people. Meanwhile, countless animals and insects have been poisoned and killed, and the eruptions wreak havoc in other ways by killing wild plants, destroying crops, blanketing entire towns in ash, and forcing people from their homes. The continuous activity has resulted in numerous ghost villages throughout the Karo district in areas that the Indonesian government deemed unsafe for human habitation. Around 30,000 residents living within a 2-mile radius of Mount Sinabung were displaced and forced to restart their lives elsewhere. Fraser Island, Australia. Situated off the southeastern coast of Queensland, Australia, Fraser Island is home to what many consider the world's most dangerous beach. For one, it's a favored haunt among great white sharks, making Fraser Island an especially risky place to go swimming in a country that is already rife with shark attacks. A 2015 Gold Coast Bulletin article reported that more people have died from shark attacks in Australia than in any other nation over the last 3 or more decades, with 32 people perishing between 1982 and 2011. While other parts of the country have seen more shark attack fatalities than Fraser Island, these apex predators are spotted regularly off the island's shores, and the risk of an unwanted encounter is ever present. Like in many places throughout Australia, you're also likely to encounter numerous other dangerous marine species if you swim off Fraser Island, including stinging jellyfish. The seas are also known to be rough, with incredibly strong riptides, and unlike most Australian beaches that attract tourists, this one is not routinely patrolled by lifeguards or emergency personnel. But you're not necessarily safe by staying on dry land either, as the island's dingoes are known to occasionally attack humans and reportedly killed a small child in recent years, according to the website All About Fraser Island. The takeaway regarding beautiful but potentially deadly places like Fraser Island is that a little common sense goes a long way, and that doing your homework on a place before visiting can be potentially life-saving. Boiling Lake, Dominica. The small Caribbean island nation of Dominica is home to a flooded fumarole, or opening in the Earth's crust, known as the Boiling Lake. The area is home to 5 volcanoes, and the lake's water is heated by steam and gases escaping from molten lava beneath it. Shrouded in a cloud of vapor, the bubbling body of water measures roughly 200 feet across, and its depth is unknown because it often changes. Water levels are known to fluctuate dramatically from time to time, with the lake practically disappearing in 1880 after a nearby eruption, only to fill back up. Between December 2004 and April 2005, the lake level lowered by roughly 33 feet and replenished within days. Tour guides made the mistake of reporting that the lake was no longer boiling in 2016 and that it was almost dry, and as a result, people began to swim in it, posting photos of their adventures on social media. But given the lake's tendency to fluctuate quickly in both water level and temperature, entering the lake is a bad idea. The public seismic network warned the general public via its website to not get boiled alive. Researchers are admittedly unsure what these changes look like and exactly what they entail, including whether a release of toxic gases is involved and whether the lake heats suddenly or gradually. On top of this unpredictability, it takes a 3 to 4 hour hike to reach the boiling lake, meaning emergency help isn't exactly readily available if something goes wrong. Izu Islands, Japan. Japan's Izu Islands archipelago are a group of 12 volcanic islands situated south of Tokyo, 9 of which are currently inhabited by humans. The volcanic chain has erupted 6 times over the last century, but the dangers posed by high concentrations of poison gas that seep up through the ground are even more concerning. Residents were evacuated in 1953 because these gas levels became unsafe, and again in 2000. They were not allowed to return until 5 years later, and rumor has it that those living on the islands of Miyakejima must carry gas masks at all times. But one visitor, Seth Louie, explained on his website that this is mostly the product of internet gossip, as sulfur dioxide levels have consistently remained safe for several years now. Are you willing to risk it? Miyakejima is open to tourists, and the scenery is said to be absolutely breathtaking and worth the visit. Scuba diving in the surrounding waters, which are known for their frequent dolphin sightings, is a popular activity. Visitors looking to enjoy the slow and peaceful way of life that many tourists miss out on during their visit to Japan can reach Miyakejima via helicopter, plane, or a 7-hour ferry ride from Tokyo. Thanks for watching! Would you ever visit any of these places? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up for more, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. See you next time! Bye!